Hello folks, welcome to Saving Time. My name's David, and I'd like to take you through the restoration of this Kirovskie you can see in front of you. While I tell you a little bit about why I think this watch is cool, let's have a look at some other examples from the manufacturer. So these were manufactured from the late 1950s right up until about 1964. They were also beloved of a youth counterculture movement in Russia that called themselves the Stylish. Now, they basically protested the government and living conditions and the conformity of Russian society, and they used these bright, colourful watches, which were far from the norm back in the 1950s, as a way to express their dissatisfaction. I'm all for anyone that wants to give the government the middle finger and look stylish while doing so. That's something I can really get behind. You can see some other Kirovskis on the screen here. They made quite a few models, most of them being more dress watch style. In fact, pretty much all of them being akin to dress watches. And they were manufactured up until 1964, when the first Moscow watch factory became Poljot, after Yuri Gagarin's famous flight in 1961. If you find a Kirovskie, you can be assured that it was not produced after 1964. Right, let's get a look at the movement on this thing. Obviously the crystal is totally trashed. I can just pull it off with my fingers. And we can get a look at the dial, obviously a little bit trashed too, but we'll try and clean that up. I'm going to pop the dial back on and flip the watch over here. There are many ways to remove the back of a watch that has a screw back. I favour this rubber ball here because it doesn't leave any tool marks, and we can get our first look at the movement. Now, if I apply a bit of air here, you'll see the balance wheel does try and go. It wants to, but it doesn't. And that's the story with this watch at the moment. It'll tick for a few minutes sometimes and then stop. So let's get the strap off. Should be easy enough. Normally I would do this before I open the case back, but I wanted to get a look at the inside of this thing. You can see the balance wheel has started to spin again. I seriously doubt that was me taking the strap off. Let's fix the thing. I'm going to undo the watch from its movement ring. The movement ring is there because the movement is actually smaller than the case and it needs something to secure it in place. The movement screws come out. There's a couple of them. It's fairly normal to see a movement ring in a watch, as a manufacturer produces one movement that fits in several different styles of watches. I'm going to take out the winding stem here and the crown so I can get this watch out of its case and we can start the disassembly. So I'll just flip the watch over to remove it from its case, and I'm going to flip it again to remove it from its movement ring, being a bit careful here not to damage my hands. I'm actually going to put the stem and crown back in so I can set the hands just to make them a little bit easier to remove, and you can see the watch has once again stopped. I'm going to use a white piece of paper which will just allow me to protect the dial while I use a couple of hand levers to remove the hands here. A little slippage there on my part, but these should pop right off as they do. I'm going to put these in a dial box. These boxes are cool. They will hold the dial kind of suspended so it doesn't touch anything. So if you're working on the watch for a while, you don't just have a loose dial knocking around. I'm going to have to undo the screws that are securing the dial. These dig into little dial feet. There's normally two around the edges of the movement. There are various different methods for this, but this one uses dial screws. I'm not prizing this off. I'm just gently trying to lift it up without damaging anything underneath, and the dial should just pop off here. So this can be a little fiddly, but there we go. So dial's going in the dial box, where it will be kept nice and safe. You can buy these dial boxes for a couple of bucks, by the way. They're not expensive. I'm going to remove this, I'm not quite sure what you would call it, the bezel ring, and you can see here that the indexes were actually part of the case, which is very weird. It's also going in the dial box, just to keep it out of harm's way. And you'll see here there's a little rubber grommet in the middle of the dial box that holds everything secure. So let's take off our dial washer, spring washer, and our hour wheel there. And here we can see the watch in a movement holder. The first thing I'm going to do is move the ratchet wheel a little bit so I can get at the click, which is the thing that has a bit of wood in it. And then I'm going to wind all the power out of the watch. You really don't want to work on a watch that still has power. I'm not actually screwing this screw, it's the spring underneath the ratchet wheel here, or the barrel with the spring in it underneath the ratchet wheel, and I'm just letting the screwdriver slide through my fingers until all the power comes out of the watch. If you try and work on a watch that's fully wound, bad things will happen. Ask me how I know. And you see our balance wheel stop spinning there, so we've taken all the power out of this watch. The first thing I like to do is remove the balance. It's a very, very delicate part of the watch. It's got that little concentric hairspring there. Very, very easy to foul that. And if you do, normally it's game over. You're normally looking for a new movement at that point, a donor, at least a complete balance or another hairspring. It can be very difficult to find on a 60-year-old watch. It's not necessary to do this, but I am not a great watchmaker. This is just a hobby of mine. I like to play it as safe as I possibly can. So I'm going to start by taking off the ratchet wheel here. And this will allow me access to the click, which I can then take off afterwards. Now, under that ratchet wheel is a spring connected to the click. This thing coming off now is called the click, and when you wind a mechanical watch, if you've ever done so, and you hear it go click, 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 that's the part of the watch that's responsible for that, hence why it's called the click. I'm fumble fingering some screws here, clicks coming out, and I'll remove the click spring next. You really, really want to watch these things. They will launch into orbit if you try and take them out without securing them. So in this case, I'm going to use a little bit of pegwood, and I'm going to move on to the crown wheel here and remove that also. This crown wheel is secured by 2 screws. Sometimes you'll find a center screw that's reverse threaded, and once again I have fumble fingered that screw right into the movement. So I'm going to leave that there. I don't really want to stick tweezers in there and start poking about. I'm going to remove the crown wheel and then retrieve it afterwards. Our crown wheel comes apart in 2 pieces, and I'm going to take off the train bridge nail, which is securing the trainer wheels. This should come off fairly easily. You want to be very, very careful when taking this off to pull it straight up and outwards. You really don't want to be dragging this thing around the pivots. Those pivots are extremely tiny going through those jewels on the top there, and you will run into all sorts of problems. That's allowed me to remove the second wheel, or the seconds wheel, the 4th wheel as it's called. Now there generally tends to be a few names for these things because of different traditions of Swiss, English, French watchmaking. But I'm going to take off the barrel bridge before I remove that intermediate wheel that you can see there, the brass one on the top. I could probably wiggle it out, but generally speaking, if you have to kind of finagle it or use any force, you're probably doing it wrong. It's also worth noting at this point that this watch is horrendously dirty on the inside. It's full of hair, it's full of old oil. I'm hoping a good cleaning and reseating and oiling of everything will bring this thing back to life. So the barrel bridge comes off now, revealing the barrel complete underneath it. Out comes our intermediate wheel, and then we can take off the bridge that holds the center wheel. The center wheel is named because it normally just sits in the center of the movement. It rotates once per hour, the minute hand is attached to it on the dial side of the movement via the cannon pinion. And we'll see all that when we flip the watch over and take a look. I'm going to remove the barrel before I get this bridge off, just to give me a bit of easier access to it, and that just pops out easy as pie. Let's take off this bridge here that's securing our center wheel. I can now also remove the escape wheel here, and I won't actually be able to remove the center wheel because it's connected to the other side of the watch via the cannon pinion, and that's a press fit. I have to take something off the other side before that center wheel will pop out. Finally, on this side, let's get rid of our pallet fork here and our pallet bridge. So the pallet bridge is coming off now, pallet fork underneath it. We're also going to have to disassemble part of the keyless works from this side. You can do it from the other side. Just as easy to do it from this side though. And we'll be getting rid of our winding pinion and our sliding pinion, or sometimes called the clutch. I'm going to push the setting lever button here that allows me to take the stem out, and everything's gone for a burn. Fantastic. Luckily enough, it landed on the desk. This will happen to you a lot, especially if you're of lower skill set like me. Bits will go flying around with the greatest of ease. The keyless works here, so named because watches back in the olden days when dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was younger, used to have a key to wind them and set them. Patek Philippe and Jaeger-LeCoultre kind of both had a hand in developing the keyless works, which allows you to wind and set a watch without a key. I'm going to take off this little placeholder here that's holding our minute wheel in place, and that will let me get the minute wheel out from the dial side of the watch, because if you didn't notice, I have flipped the watch over. That's the minute wheel there. Let's get the intermediate setting wheel out, which is what allows us to set the watch. Basically, it acts as part of the keyless works. And we're going to take off some of these cover plates from the keyless works so we can get at them and start the disassembly. This first cover plate is going to come out. We've got another cover plate below it that also has a spring on it that connects to the set lever. So let's get that out. And here you can see, well, I've slowed the next part down a little bit because we need to get the yoke and the yoke spring out. Now it goes without saying you want to get the yoke spring first. So I've slowed this down as that yoke spring launches itself into outer space. Perfect.
One eternity later.
Okay, we're back. Found the spring all the way across the other side of the room, and yes, that was as fun as it sounded. I also removed the set lever. Now I'm going to use a cannon pinion remover to pull the cannon pinion, and I managed to get my hand in every shot on that one, so there is the cannon pinion. This will allow the center wheel to drop freely from the other side of the movement, and there it is. I think there should be just one more cap jewel to come out of this watch. And there it is. So let's get rid of this, and we're basically done with the easy bit, the dismantling. Let's just hope I can get it back together again. This jewel is going to come out. I'm actually not going to try this with a pair of tweezers. It's in there pretty tight. I'm just going to see if I can turn that upside down and flip it. And there's our cap jewel. And here is our set-in lever button thing that also came out. So as you can see, the movement here is now completely stripped. You can start to see how much oil and crap there is on it. And I shall move on now to the cleaning. Here we can see all the various component parts of the watch we disassembled. Excuse the shaky camera work here. This is the first time I'm really filming anything. But these parts are going to go into a cleaning solution and then into an ultrasonic cleaner. I like to use small baskets. I also like to put the balance back on just to protect it during cleaning. I'll be taking it apart later. I use these, as I said, little baskets. They keep all the parts nice and secure and together so they don't rattle around. I'm actually going to leave the barrel on this one. I have a new spring for it, but it's not here yet. And I'm going to just put those little baskets in here, use this ultrasonic cleaner with Elmer Professional Watch Cleaning and Watch Rinsing Solution. Okay, our watch is back from the cleaners and I'm going to remove the balance. It's going to need a little extra care and attention. I'm going to need to oil that jewel you can see on the top. Personally, I'm used to watches that have an ink block or a shock setting, so this kind of disassembly is not really necessary. So this is quite new to me, so I didn't get all of it on camera. It was a little fiddly. But I'm just going to grab the balance cock here and remove the entire balance assembly, and then I'm going to undo the screw that holds the spring stud. That will allow me to drop this into its component parts. Now, I did try and channel my inner watchmaker here, but apparently I got Jim Henson on the line because I'm a bit more of a muppet. So as I said, the filming on this is a little bit rough. But as you can see, I have this out now. I'm going to undo the 2 screws at the bottom, which will allow that cap jewel to fall away and allow me to oil it and clean it. Now this is going along with a hairspring into Bergeron B-dip. I believe it used to be called 1-dip. For those of you who are interested, that's what I use for cleaning this kind of thing. I'm going to separate here the regulator from the jewel. Those should come apart fairly easily. Now I can polish the jewel with a little bit of pegwood. There's some old oil on there. A pegwood's just wood without sap, basically. As I understand it, you really don't want to use a toothpick for this. You can leave all sorts of residue behind. As I said, I didn't manage to do a great job capturing this on camera, but you can see the screws going back in. The cap jewel has been oiled. I need to do that under high magnification. A lot of the oiling on this watch will actually be off camera because my microscope doesn't actually have a video out. I'll try and fix that for the next video. And you can see we're just doing up the screw that holds the stud there and the balance is back together. Now it did take a little more finagling after that, but I'm going to spare you that particular catastrophe. Now, center wheel's gone back in, little dot of oil, center wheel bridge will go back in and be screwed down. I'm just going to make sure before I put that in that the wheel spins freely, and you'll see me doing this quite a lot. The pivots, well, the center wheel pivot is huge, but most of the wheel pivots are tiny, and if you do not make sure that they are in their pivot holes in their jewels normally, before you press down on that, you're going to end up in a world of trouble. You're going to bend one of those pivots, and you're going to have to be a better watchmaker than me to straighten that out again. I know this from experience. So the intermediate wheel is going back in now. The next wheel will be the 4th wheel, so that's the center seconds. Basically, the center hand on the other side of the watch is connected directly to this in this particular watch movement design. The escape wheel's going in. It's not really part of the gear train, it's part of the escapement, but it lives under the train bridge in this case. The train bridge is going on, and you'll see me be extremely careful here as to how that goes on. Now I'm just going to tease the wheels a little bit to try and get those pivots to drop into place. I'm going to use, again, a little bit of pegwood. There's basically no pressure on this. I'm just resting it until those wheels drop into place. This can be very awkward and very time consuming. So if you're thinking about trying this yourself, just know that it looks quicker here on the edit than it actually was. So once I'm sure that those wheels are in their pivot holes, I can start to screw down the bridge. And I did extra checking off camera that they were actually in place. Although I have tried to edit this video in such a way that I don't come off looking better than I am at this. I don't want to give the opinion that I am a watchmaker. I am not. I am a watch collector that's just delving into watchmaking as a hobby. I hope to get better over the course of this journey. And one of the reasons I'm putting this on YouTube is I've found the watch community here is extremely nice. So I'm hoping that people will have some comments for me, whatever you like, just let me know. And you can see those wheels spinning freely there. I'm going to put the barrel back in, which is connected to the center wheel to deliver power to the train of wheels. So I should be able to just spin the barrel here and everything should spin nice and freely, which indeed it does. Again, I'm going to put a little bit of oil here. I'm not showing most of the oiling on camera. And this barrel is coming out soon anyway, because I have a new mainspring for this watch, which didn't arrive in time for this video. Unfortunately, this watch is going to be a gift for a friend. The setting lever is going back in now, just so I don't forget to put it in before I put the barrel bridge on, which is something I have been known to do in the past and ended up having to take everything apart. So the barrel bridge is going on here. I'm going to put the click spring back in. Now, you want to be really careful with these springs. I'm using a piece of Radico here, which is like Blue Tack for watchmakers. Don't use Blue Tack, it will leave residue on your watch, which you definitely do not want. And this spring is a bit of a pain to get back in. So the ratchet wheel goes back on. I'm not going to actually screw that down right now. I just want to put it on there so the click spring cannot spring off into the stratosphere. I'm going to put the pallet fork in here. I'm not going to oil this particular part of the movement. It doesn't normally get oiled in modern horology, but I'm going to put the pallet bridge back on, just tighten that down. Now, again, this is one of those very fiddly things. You do not want to, I don't like to tighten this down all the way before I have verified that that pivot is definitely engaged. Very, very easy to bend your pivots and end up in a whole world of problems. So I'm using a piece of pegwood just to make sure that's in there. Now I'm going to screw down the ratchet wheel here. I just really don't want that spring flying off to join Mr. Gagarin on his historic flight and orbit the Earth. Get the ratchet wheel in. This will allow me to get the click on, the crown wheel, and screw the barrel bridge down. So again, a little bit more oil here. For the bigger pieces, I'll try and show some oiling. For the jewels and stuff, again, as I said, has to be done under high magnification. I'll try and sort it out, but for now, this is what I got. Right, so let's get the click on. Easy enough here. And the crown wheel. So a little bit of oil for the crown wheel. That's probably way too much oil there. One of the other reasons I like to film these things is because I say this is a hobby for me. I'm just starting out, really. And the video picks up a lot of the mistakes you've made and can be genuinely helpful for getting an unfamiliar movement back together. The crown wheel goes on here, and the two microscopically small screws have to go back into place. Recording yourself while you're doing this is also quite a useful trait if you forget where everything goes. Now, you will get better at that as time goes by. I've gotten better at it. So I'm going to screw on the barrel bridge now, which I probably should have screwed on first. But in this case, it's not really holding any delicate pivots or anything, so it shouldn't make that much of a difference. Please, by all means, anyone let me know if you see me do anything wrong. I am definitely here to try and learn. Criticism is always welcome. You know, I'm a big lad, I can take it. And I genuinely would be interested to hear your opinion. Leave it in the comments down below. Right, I'm going to flip the watch over now so I can get started on the motion works, or the keyless works in this case. I start with the keyless works here, and I'm just going to put a bit of oil on that so I can put the set lever back in. And the keyless works on this watch is a little overly flowery, so I'm going to put the clutch or the sliding pinion in, and I'm going to put the winding pinion in behind it. Now, I've oiled these off camera. I'm going to put the stem back in just to help hold everything in place while I put the rest of it together. And you can see the sliding pinion slide back there. Now we have the yoke or the clutch lever, which engages there with the clutch. And I'm going to put the yoke spring in. This was the one that blasted off across the room in the previous video. I'm going to be extra cautious here. Make sure to hold this down with a piece of pegwood. Make sure it can't get away on me. It's still a giant pain in the backside. People that repair chronographs with all their springs, like, I hope to get to that point, well, in the future. But it looks horrendous to deal with all of the springs. It's a cover plate with an integrated spring going on here for the set lever, and then there's another cover plate. And once again, I am going to go into slow motion. that had all the tension of the spring on it, and it exploded. So we are back. I have found all the parts, and I am now finishing off our keyless works here. So I really should have held that down with a piece of pegwood, but again, that's inexperience for you. Kind of knew I should do it, but I thought I'd get away with it. Being a little more meticulous would probably have helped me in that regard, but not to worry, we are back. I'm just going to oil here for the intermediate setting wheel, sorry. And that's going to go back on. And our keyless works should be now pretty much complete. Over to the motion works. I'm going to put the cannon pinion on, and this is a press fit. So I'm going to use a pair of brass tweezers to just gently press this down, and you should see it click into place, which you do. So our minute wheel's going on now. You're going to need its cover plate as well. So let's get the minute wheel cover plate on. That also helps sliding pinion, winding pinion, sorry, not jump out of the watch. So again, with some microscopic screws, I'm going to give the cap jewel a clean, again with some pegwood and some Bergeon B-dip. This is the cap jewel that goes on the dial side of the watch. So we'll get that back in now. Again, very, very tiny screw. I'm also going to oil that. Sorry guys, off camera, I know, but I will try and get a little better with my camera work in the next video. Microscopic screw for that goes in. Test the motion works and the keyless works here, make sure they're all connected together and doing their job. And as you can see, that seems to be working fine. It's also buttery smooth after the cleaning and oiling, which is very nice. And I'm going to drop the balance back in. Now this is the big bit. If this doesn't spin, then there'll be no video. And I did take it apart, and thank God. I'm very, very happy to see that spinning. The amplitude by eye looks a little low, but that's probably due to the mainspring in this watch being 60 years old. And I'm going to replace it. Just unfortunately couldn't do that for you here because it didn't arrive in time, quite simply. So I'm going to screw the balance down. Now it's in and ticking. And I'm going to turn my attention to the dial. So I'll place the dial on a piece of rudder coat, and I'm going to try some gentle cleaning. I'm actually going to try some water on this one. Normally I never would, and I genuinely wouldn't recommend it because you will damage the print. But I do happen to have a spare dial. So here's what it looks like after cleaning. Basically a gentle rub with just a very small amount of water. And you can see that's taken some of the print off down the bottom, which is why I wouldn't recommend this. Our wheel goes on here along with our dial washer. When it comes to dial restoration and dial cleaning, generally for me less is more. As I said, I happen to have a spare dial for this watch, so I thought I'd give it a try. I wouldn't recommend it again. I'm just going to reiterate that. It's a true skill to be able to clean a dial up properly. So this one's looking a little better. I'm just going to make sure the dial feet have engaged with the movement, and then I'm going to tighten the screws to make sure that those dial feet are locked in place and our dial can't go anywhere. So I'm going to refit the hands here and have a little tool for this. There are various ways to do it. Because this watch has no calendar works, I don't really mind how the hands go on. So I press fitted the first hand on. The minute hand is going on now, and I want to make sure that these are perfectly lined up with 12 o'clock. This could be any hour, to be fair. That 12 o'clock's just an easy visual reference. Now this is awkward and fiddly. Just take your time with it. Finally, the second hand goes on. I have to use a pair of brass tweezers here. Normally I use plastic tweezers for hands, it's not to scratch them, but the second hand's too small for my plastic tweezers. Hand is on, the watch is ticking, which is a good thing. I'm now going to make sure that I can rotate the hands freely, because occasionally you'll have press fit them on, there'll be an angle and they'll bump into each other and fall off the watch, which is probably not what you want. And you can see they make it back to 12 o'clock. Now our case has been through the ultrasonic cleaner, again in the watch cleaning solution. and rinsing agent, and I'm just going to use this buff stick. I think it's 3000 grit, so you're not going to take material off with this, because this watch is nickel-plated brass, most probably. It could be chromed brass. But I did the best I could with it, and for a 60, possibly almost 70-year-old watch, it's looking pretty good. The bezel ring will go back in. It's got an index marker on it, so you know which way it goes. And then you can see those ferocious indexes along with our bezel ring and case back. So let's get the watch back in here. It's just a case of flipping it over and popping it in, popping its movement ring in, and then you can see the watch. Now, I have an old crystal for this. Again, I shall be getting a newer one because this is a gift, and I'm going to make sure that the case back is tightened up there, as you can see. Okay, so the strap's going back on here, and we should be about done. Now, I'm going to give you some shots of this thing on wrist. I think it looks absolutely fantastic. I'm keeping the old brown ostrich strap I have, and I think this watch is truly unique in so many ways. It has a very interesting history to it. You can actually find them for sale, which is nice, and it's just a beautiful piece to me. I love the history and everything about it. Before I go, I have to let you know that I could not put this on the time grapher because mine broke during the filming of this video. I've ordered a new one, but apparently it's coming via rowboat because it's been over a month now, but I'll update you the next video I put out on the accuracy. Now, I've had it on wrist for about 48 hours, and it is running about 40 seconds fast, which is not great. But without a time grapher, it's going to be very difficult to regulate and ascertain the cause of that issue. Now, if you've stuck with me for this long, I very much appreciate that. Like, a comment would be appreciated, and I will see you in the next one. I will leave you here with some turntable images of the finished watch. Thanks very much for sticking with me. I'm David. This has been Saving Time, and I'll see you on the next one.